Hey, what's up guys? So Escort has just announced their latest non-aero radar detector. It's the Escort Max 4. And this new Max 4 is the successor to the Max 3. Now feature-wise, the new Max 4 is actually very similar to the previous Max 3. You've got Bluetooth, GPS, etc. However, there are two key changes here. Number one, you're going to get longer detection range, and number two, you're going to get better blind spot filtering. Now, surprisingly though, Escort is not using their newer Blackfin DSP platform for the Max 4 the way they're doing with a lot of their other newer detectors. I would have guessed that they would do so to give themselves a non-aero version of their Blackfin detectors, but that platform does have some pros and cons. For example, the blind spot filtering on the Blackfin detectors is pretty effective. It actually works better than what we see on the comparable Uniden and Valentine detectors. However, Escort's claim that their Blackfin DSP offers lightning fast performance, unfortunately, is simply not true. And so personally, I've been really curious to see what this Max 4 is like. Now, I've had a chance to beta test it since late last year. And the copy of the detector that I have here for testing has pilot production hardware, and I tested with a couple different firmware versions. And now that the Max 4 has been officially announced, let's go ahead and take a closer look now here at what all is new with this Escort Max 4. Now overall, the Max 4 here is geared towards being a detector that you can just kind of set it and forget it. It's going to give you long range performance, it's going to be quiet when it comes to false alerts, it's got GPS built in, as well as Bluetooth to pair with your phone and connect to Escort's Drive Smarter app. And in theory, when the detector is connected to the cloud, it should give you the speed limit display on the face of the detector, as well as allow you to share alerts in real time with other drivers, though that functionality is currently broken. We'll get to that here in just a minute. It can alert you to red light cameras and speed cameras, as well as some photo radar systems like the Multiradar and the Mesh Diffusion. And taking a closer look now as far as what's new here with the Max 4, let's begin by taking a look first at the blind spot filtering. And this may actually be one of my favorite parts of the Max 4. Despite the fact that this is not a Blackfin detector, it actually does a great job at filtering out blind spot falses. Now, while the detector does occasionally false to some of the usual suspects like your Mazdas, Hondas, Acuras, and GMs, it pretty rarely falses in my experience. In fact, in many instances, I've driven past a Mazda where the detector was totally silent, and I've driven by different Hondas and Acuras where the detector is silent too. In the instances where it does false, I just see a weak alert on K-band, none of the full tilt blasts like we've seen with some of the previous iterations of their detectors. And so overall, it's quieter than some of its competitors from companies like Uniden, Redenso, and Whistler, for example. And in the times when it does false, I see pretty good alert presentation here as well. And then when it comes to GPS lockouts, of course, those are available here too. So when you pass by a stationary false alert, like a speed sign or a door opener, you can teach the Max 4 where those false alerts are located so that it can mute them for you in the future. Furthermore, you've got your automatic GPS lockouts as well, so the detector can automatically lock those signals out for you after you pass by the signals several times. Now that said, Escort's implementation of GPS lockouts can be pretty aggressive in an attempt to keep the detector quiet. For example, I've seen an instance where a blind spot false from a Mazda CX-5 was actually getting locked out because I picked it up near a shopping center door opener that had been previously locked out. Furthermore, I've also seen this happen in areas where there's no other door openers around, like in this example here, where an Acura drove by me, up ahead of me, and that signal had been locked out as well. Now, I've seen this happen with other Escort detectors as well, so it's not something exclusive to the Max 4, it's just the way Escort's been approaching their lockouts. Again, they're prioritizing keeping the detector quiet above all else, which can sometimes come at the expense of alerting you to signals that shouldn't otherwise be being muted. Now, with that in mind, let's next shift gears and take a look at performance. Now, starting off with long-range detection, according to Escort, the new Max 4 is actually going to give you even longer range than what we've been seeing with the Max 3. Now, I haven't done any formal testing yet with the Max 4 compared to its competitors, in part because of the fact that it's, well, been the rainy season here in Seattle. But regardless of how it winds up doing in testing, I don't actually think that long-range performance will wind up being one of the key reasons why you would choose the Max 4 over one of its competitors. I actually think that some of the other things that I've been seeing, like the blind spot filtering and actually some of the other issues, which I'll talk about here in just a moment, are actually going to be bigger factors. But coming back to long-range detection, I've been driving around with it the past couple months, and I've been having some nice saves here with the Max 4. Most of the terrain up here can be pretty challenging. We've got trees and curves and hills and whatnot, things of course that can block and absorb radar. And so having a sensitive detector is going to be especially important for me up here. I also like the fact that it gives a new bogey alert tone to let you know if there's some additional radar signals up ahead. For example, I had this one encounter where there was an officer running constant on radar while he was driving towards me. And then after passing that cop, I later wound up picking up a second set of officers who already had a customer pulled over on the side of the road. And the Max 4 wound up giving me plenty of advance warning against both the moving and the stationary officers. I've also had some nice saves picking up constant on radar in curvy encounters around a bend. Again, not crazy long-range detections in scenarios like this, but plenty sufficient for a save. And then when it comes to instant on radar, we'll first start with a K-band detection. I had one save where I picked up the first shot well before I rounded the bend. And then a few seconds later, I wound up getting a second detection as the car ahead of me and I both wound up approaching the officer driving the opposite direction. Now, you're not always going to be that fortunate when it comes to instant on, of course. For example, I had another detection on KA band where I actually wound up seeing the officer before my detector went off and I was hitting the brakes before the detector alerted. Now, to be fair, this is how it goes sometimes with instant on, but after this encounter, it definitely made me wonder more about the response times here with the Max 4, like how long did it take between when the officer started transmitting and my detector actually going off? Especially because of the fact that, well, response time is a known weakness here with some Escort detectors. Now, again, the Max 4 is not a blackfin detector. It is based on an older platform, which generally does have a little better response time than some of their newer platform detectors. And so I wanted to go ahead and test this out as well. And unfortunately, this is when I started discovering some of the more critical issues. Now, for the first round of testing, I was using the Stalker 2 on 34/7 against a Max 4 running one of the beta firmwares. And for the first and fifth test shots, I was seeing response time anywhere from just under a second to a little over 2 seconds. More concerning though, for the other 3 test shots, the Max 4 didn't alert at all to the Stalker 2, even with me holding down the trigger for anywhere between 5 to 6 seconds. And obviously this is worse than just poor response time. This is flat out not alerting at all. Now, I reported this issue to Escort, and then I updated the detector to a newer version of the firmware, and things did start to get better, but still not perfect. I went out for a second round of testing, and sorry about the suction cup failure. This is actually an example of why I wound up doing a video recently talking about upgrading from using your suction cups. But either way, when we take a look at the test results, against the Stalker 2, it actually did a great job. It wound up alerting to all the test shots that I gave it. And the response times of the Max 4 were actually pretty good here. I next tested with the Stalker DSR-2X, which also transmits at 34/7, and I saw similarly good results here with the DSR-2X. Again, it alerted to all 5 of the test shots that I gave it against this gun. And when I was back home reviewing the test footage, I was definitely starting to get pretty relieved here, until I wound up taking a look at the test footage with the Detector Genesis 2. With this KA gun transmitting at 35.5, with the first test shot, I had the gun transmitting for 8 seconds, and again, the Max 4 was silent the entire time. For the other 4 shots though, the Max 4 actually did great. It picked up all 4, and it gave me pretty good response time for all the different shots. So obviously that's better than before, but still not where I'd want to see it. Now, I then reported these results over to Escort, and they suggested that maybe there's some issues with the Genesis 2 needing at least 2 minutes to actually fully start up, warm up, and calibrate itself. I'd waited about 30 seconds or so between powering on the detector and starting the round of testing with the Genesis 2. This time I gave the radar gun about 4 to 5 minutes or so to warm up before I started testing, and I also triggered some initial test shots here just to make sure everything was working properly before I got my cameras rolling and synchronized and all. The Max 4 I had running for closer to 10 minutes or so before I started testing. Now, this time around, I gave the detector 10 different test shots, and like before, again, for the first test shot, I got no alert at all from the Genesis 2, despite the fact that that gun was transmitting for about 7 seconds or so. Then for the remaining 9 shots, it picked up all of those. Most of the shots were decently quick, but occasionally some of the delays were still longer than I would like. And as part of the troubleshooting process, Escort's actually gone out to try and replicate the same testing that I've done. And it turns out, I'm not sure if this is good or bad, but they've actually had better results than what I've seen, and they haven't been able to replicate these same results. In Escort's testing of the Max 4 against their Genesis 2, they said that they've been seeing response times around half a second to just over 1 second, with the majority of the shots that they're seeing with the detector taking less than 1 second to alert. They said they also haven't seen the same issue with the detector missing the first shot or any of the subsequent shots the way that I've seen in my testing. And then against the Stalker 2, there's been a couple other follow-up tests against this radar gun as well, and again, the results are better than what I saw in my testing. There's been some testing both with Escort as well as another external tester like myself, somebody who doesn't actually work for the company. Starting off first with Escort's test, they did 10 different shots across 2 different days, and the results were excellent. It was like half a second or less in response time. excellent here, all the way up to just under a second. None of the shots even took longer than a second, so really nice response time here as far as Escort's test results. Then as far as the third-party tester, they also had a stock or two, and their results were similar to Escort's with response times anywhere between half a second to a second or so. So that's kind of more in line of what I would expect with a non-Blackfin DSP detector. The older platforms did have better response time than some of the newer detectors, and this is, again, more of what I would expect to see. Now, the issues that I've been seeing in my test, is it something related to the copy of the detector that Escort sent me? I don't know. Is it related to the radar guns that I have here on hand? I don't know. Is it a firmware issue? I've tested different firmware versions, like, I don't actually know. And so it's hard to say conclusively, like, okay, what is the issue? And then also, if you were to go out and buy the detector, would it perform well for you? I don't know. All I know so far is, like, I've still got some questions here, and I don't feel fully confident in this detector, and thus I can't fully be like, yes, I have the confidence to recommend that this is going to be great for you as well. It may be, right? But I don't know, which makes it tough. I don't feel fully comfortable being able to, like, recommend it yet. But a lot of the stuff that we're seeing so far does actually seem pretty promising. And if they can kind of iron out some of these consistency and reliability issues, we should have a detector that actually gives us pretty reasonable response times. I'd always love to see better, of course, but this so far sounds pretty promising. We'll kind of have to see how things go over time when there's more testing being done, or perhaps even future updates. Hopefully not hardware, hopefully it's just a firmware update, if that's all it is, or maybe it's just my radar guns. I don't know. But either way, I'd love to see kind of like, as continued testing is being done, we'll have to see how everything plays out over time. And speaking of updates, there's another quick change that I want to talk about going from the Max 3 to the Max 4, and it actually has to do with the USB port on the side of the detector. You see, Escort's actually upgraded the USB connector from mini USB to USB Type-C. And this USB port, it's only designed for updating the detector. You can try powering on the detector over USB and it will turn on, but it'll also throw a low voltage error and then shut the detector off. And so for that reason, for power, you're still gonna wanna use the included traditional power cable that uses an RJ11 connector. And then there's also two other issues that I've noticed in testing that I wanna quickly mention. Number one actually has to do with some laser falsing. You see, there's this one stretch of road where I find that the Max 4 will consistently false to laser. It doesn't happen with other brands of detectors or even other Escort detectors. I haven't had laser falses happen anywhere else, just in this one specific location. And none of the other beta testers have reported falsing to laser either. And so I think it's something related to this specific location. I've tried doing some troubleshooting by driving past that same location with radar detectors that can display the pulse rate of different laser signals that they detect. But again, no other radar detector or laser jammer is falsing in that same area. But either way, while this is an issue that I've been seeing, it doesn't seem to be a widespread issue that a lot of people are experiencing, or even myself, I'm not seeing it in other areas. Now, as far as something that is more widespread, we're actually seeing some issues with the Bluetooth functionality, particularly when you're using it with Escort's Drive Smarter app. Now, the Drive Smarter app, of course, is helpful for going in and quickly adjusting the different settings on the detector without having to go into the detector's menu itself. Additionally, the app can also go out and reference the speed limit of the road that you're on and display the speed limit on the face of the detector right next to your current speed. However, that feature doesn't work very well if you've got the app backgrounded, so I often find myself having to actually bring the app back up to the foreground to ensure that all the connectivity functionality is working properly. Finally, the app is also supposed to give you the ability to share alerts in real time with other drivers, but unfortunately that functionality has actually been broken now for months. The speed limit display, that's something that they've been working on. That seems to be better, or working better for people in different situations, but it's the cloud alerts in particular that seem to have even more of an issue. In fact, for all the months that I've been testing with the detector, I've seen exactly 0 cloud alerts. Now, I actually went out to go test this, and I would trigger the detector to KA band, and I would see that alert getting reported to the cloud in Drive Smarter. Then the next time that I would come back, I would see that alert being displayed in the Drive Smarter app, but unfortunately it would not be displayed on the face of the detector itself. And again, this is a well-known issue. It affects many different detectors. It's not Max 4 exclusive, and it's been an issue now for months. This is something that Escort is aware of. They've been working on it. Sounds like it's a little trickier for them to fix than expected. But nevertheless, given the fact that a lot of this cloud functionality is one of the key reasons why you would choose an Escort detector specifically over maybe another detector, I definitely think that it is something they really need to get addressed quickly. But for the time being, at the time that I've been shooting this video and all the time that I've been doing my testing, none of the cloud functionality is working. So hopefully this is also something that Escort can get fixed quickly, not only for their Max 4 users, but also for the users of all their other radar detectors as well. And then as far as getting notified of when the fix is available, I asked them about that, and they said that they'll post a thread on the forums for when they actually get everything fixed and working properly again, and that would be the best way to get notified of once all the cloud stuff is finally working properly again. And so with all that said, final thoughts here with the Max 4. Like with other Escort detector launches, I think we're in a similar boat to where like the detector has a lot of promise, but it also has some critical issues that prevent me from being comfortable running it myself or recommending it to others. The range seems pretty good in practice. The blind spot filtering seems excellent, but I also wind up questioning how much of the filtering can actually come at the expense of performance. You know, I'm seeing situations where the detector is not alerting to legitimate police radar properly. I've been seeing situations where blind spot falses are being incorrectly muted due to GPS lockouts. And given that we know that Escort prioritizes quietness compared to the competition, and yes, their detectors are quieter, I think that maybe they've gone too far on the side of trying to keep the detector quiet, potentially at the risk of actually alerting you to signals that the detector should otherwise alert you to. Could this be fixed in a future firmware update? Obviously, there's no way for me to know for sure, but I certainly hope so. Now, as far as the Max 4 here in its current form, based on what I've been seeing so far, I don't yet fully trust the detector, so therefore I don't yet have the confidence to depend on it when I really need it. Now, because of that, I then don't feel fully comfortable recommending it yet either in its current form. I hope that one day soon, Escort's able to fully address all these issues that we've been seeing here, because I think a properly working Max 4 could actually be a pretty solid detector. And on that note, down in the video description, I'm going to include links to some additional information. For example, links to any sort of updates or discussion regarding improvements to the detector that have come out after I've posted this video. Additionally, links to where you can purchase the detector if you'd like to pick one up. And so with that said, that's my thoughts here on the Escort Max 4. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys are doing great, and I'll see you in the next one.